The KindlED Podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda can help you start and run an amazing microschool. For more information, go to prenda.com.
What impact is this kind of learning going to have on that new generation, and what are they going to go on to do? Because what we're creating here are learners who have gotten used to following their own path. They've had opportunity to explore their identity and interests and exercise their autonomy from a young age. It's going to be, I believe, deeply disruptive in a positive and necessary way to our society globally.
Hi, and welcome to the KindlED Podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves.
Welcome to the KindlED Podcast. Hi, Adriane. How's it going today?
Good. How are you doing today, Katie?
I'm doing great. Nothing to report. How are things at your house?
Good. We're just getting ready for the holidays, and my husband has taken some time off of work and wanted to do an outdoor kitchen.
Wow.
I was thinking it would just be like a grill and just like a countertop. I mean, this thing, he has been working like 12 hours every day because I was thinking, oh, he's off of work. I'm working. I'm going to have extra help with the kids. And I mean, I'm very, very, very thankful that he's building this outdoor kitchen. It is insane, just the amount of work. And the kids, I love seeing how excited they are. Like, Dad's learning this and he's watching YouTube and just like modeling this, hey, we can learn anything because we have access to YouTube.
The story is like making me think about my dad, and I don't know why I've never put this together before, but like when my mom was pregnant with me, my he's a dentist, and he started a 4-bedroom, 1-bathroom addition onto our house. That's a big commitment. And my grandpa was a contractor, like a construction guy, and I was talking to my mom, and my mom was like, do you think he'll have this done before the baby comes? And my grandpa was like, no, this is going to take like 2 years. And this addition wasn't finished when I graduated high school. Like, it was my whole life that like our house was this construction project, which was like so stressful and like in lots of ways not good, but also like I just watched my dad, he's a dentist, like that's his specialty, just totally jump to, and now I'm going to build a house with my own hands. And just like the amount of just the audacity of that, like I'm just now putting that together. I'm like, oh, maybe that is why I feel like so uninhibited to just like go do crazy things and like learn anything. Like maybe I've just in this moment, Adriane, you're helping me make this tie between my dad's example.
I love it. And then one of our core values at Prenda is learning over comfort. And that is what I'm hearing. And that's what I'm seeing is, I mean, Dave is just, he has cuts and scrapes. So I'm literally over comfort. Not comfortable, not physically comfortable. And we're going to get to enjoy it with this. We're having friends over. So that's another thing too, is he put this pressure on himself because he's invited our neighbors over for this Saturday. And then he's like, oh, I have to get this done. It's like this extra pressure. I'm like, but I do feel like if he didn't do that, maybe it just like wouldn't get done. And it would be until our kids were graduating high school. No, okay.
Okay, so when you said learning over comfort, what I would do to translate that to my situation growing up would be that we chose my dad's learning over my mom's comfort. Because it was definitely uncomfortable for my mom to live in a construction zone for 25 years, for sure. But this is all reminding me of our guest today. We're talking to the CEO and founder of Outschool, Amir Nathoo, and I just want to make sure, just to call attention to this. Outschool has actually given us a little promo code to share with all of you guys. So if you want $20 off of your first Outschool class for one of your kids, you can go to outschool.com and put in the code leadership20, all caps, leadership, all caps 20, and you can have $20 off your first class. I thought that was so nice of them.
That was very nice of them. Thank you, Outschool. And so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amir before we talk to him. Amir Nathoo is CEO of Outschool, a marketplace for live online classes for K through 12 learners. Amir worked at Square, leading the development of Square Payroll. Previously, he served as CEO and co-founder of Trigger.io, a development platform for creating native mobile apps. He holds a master's in engineering in electrical and information sciences from the University of Cambridge. Amir lives in San Francisco with his wife, Christy, and their two children. We cannot wait to talk to Amir. Well, welcome, Amir. We are so excited to talk to you today and learn all about Outschool.
Yeah, so glad to be here talking to you. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So, as we jump in, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your background and how did you come to the work that you're doing currently in education, and what is your big why for the work that you do?
Yeah, happy to share about my background, but I'll start with the big why. In summary, it's to pay it forward because I gained so much growing up from my parents' support of out of school learning and the tremendous opportunities that those gave me. And that appreciation for out of school learning, that's where the name Outschool, my company, comes from, has led me to desire to share those learnings with others and create more opportunities for others. And specifically, I was very fortunate. Both my parents were teachers, and so growing up, in the traditional education system in the UK, they really supported me, but not just in terms of the traditional education I was receiving and supporting me in that at home, but also helping me pursue my interests out of school. And one of those interests was computers, because I became interested in trying to program computer games. They bought me an early computer when I was young. And they helped me pursue that interest by finding resources for me to learn. And at the time, they weren't doing it because they thought they could turn it into a career or that it was going to be valuable. It's because they had this real belief that helping kids pursue interests was going to create a love of learning. And of course, some of those interests, it turned out that particular one has also turned into a career. And when I think about the importance of that, I want to create more opportunities for other kids to get support, both from their family and from others, in order to pursue learning, and not just within the confines of traditional education.
And it seems like you are absolutely doing that with all that Outschool offers. So, can you talk a little bit about what does Outschool do?
Yeah, so Outschool is a marketplace of live online classes for kids. So these are classes that meet in small group over Zoom with kids around the country, or in fact around the world, and a teacher facilitator. And it's a marketplace. What this means is, teachers are free to teach the classes that they always wanted to teach and in the way they want. And so they free to unleash their creativity and teach core courses, but in innovative ways that match interests, or courses that you could never even imagine. We have, cat anatomy taught by a vet. We have math and geometry taught through art. We have the science of farts, which parents love because the science is really great. And obviously, kids love because it's hilarious.
Wait, I want to clarify. You're saying science of FARTS, right? Farts.
Yeah, in a British accent. In a British accent. Good clarification.
That is incredible. And I'm sure the kids really do love that one. I know just yesterday, I picked up my son. He goes to a Montessori school and they got to go grocery shopping. They all walked across the street. It's like less than, a half a mile. And they are making this big meal for their class. He was so excited. And I was asking him about it. I said, so what did you do today? And he's like, oh, I went and I learned like there's signs that hang from the ceiling and it has like dairy and eggs. And I'm like, did I never teach him this? Like that there's signs at a grocery store. And he said, and then we found the cream cheese and we had to pull it off the shelf. I said, oh, that's great. So I wanted to record him saying it. So I pull up my phone and I said, so Dax, what did you learn today? And he goes, I farted. I pooped. And it was like hilarious. So I bet he would love to learn about the science of farts, in addition to learning how to grocery shop.
And that's to me, that's learning at its best. You hook an interest, and then you go deep into that interest, and you start seeing all the connections. And in that way, you can make sometimes some pretty dry subjects interesting and relevant for kids, and it really works. And it's shocking to me how well it's worked for my own son, who's takes classes on Outschool now, and many others report the same. But and this isn't new in terms of the research and the philosophy. It's been well understood by researchers for a long time. And I think it's gotten a little lost, but it's kind of what we mean when we say personalization in education. It's been kind of so overused at this point that it's kind of lost a bit of that meaning. But this is what it means to me. This like deep, very unique personalization to individual kids' motivations and interests, and using that as the path to learning. But it goes against like how the traditional system has been designed for logistical reasons and for historic reasons. And so, the change in the traditional system has been slow, too slow. And that's why there's an ecosystem and an alternative education movement, which is gaining steam as there's greater and greater realization of what it means to create a future-proof education. And with all the changes in the world, people are starting to realize, like, AI, all these like, technological and social trends. And you start to wonder, really, is my kid going to learn the standard stuff? Is that really the way to prepare them for the future? I don't know. Maybe messing around with AI and 3D printers is a better way to do it. I mean, that's kind of what I want from my kid. But then fears come up. It's like, oh crap. But then what about college? Like, what about jobs? It's like the those are reasonable fears, and I have them too. And I know the jobs and the work environments in 20 years' time are going to be completely different than they are today. And when you can't predict the future, then this idea that you can just follow a standard path that was designed decades, centuries before starts to seem like madness.
Yeah, it actually maybe is madness. Like maybe we could I think what's madness is that so what you're talking about is inquiry-based learning, inquiry-led learning, right? Where you allow a child to ask questions and then that curiosity or their interest or their passion drives what they do and how they learn. And we do this a lot at Prenda, and it makes adults wildly uncomfortable because there's safety in that those train tracks and something that we try to help our guides and there's even safety in it for kids, right? They want to know, they want to be told what to do when they've been conditioned to want that, right? Then they're like, I don't know how to ask a question. I don't know what I'm interested in, right? And so I love that Outschool gives you, like when you're shopping, like window shopping, you're like, oh, I didn't know that I wanted that. I didn't know that I like that was interesting to me. I love Outschool because it's like, oh, I've never even thought to ask that question about how something works with cats, but now I'm suddenly very interested about that. And so it's almost like an inquiry, like you said, it's marketplace, right? So it's just a way to explore your interests and passions in a very actionable way, because then there's something you can do right then to like take action on that. It's not like a passive like, oh, I should Google that sometime. It's like, no, here's an opportunity for me to learn with real kids and with an expert, and really facilitating that inquiry. So I think that the world needs more and more ways to lean into that for sure, and to make inquiry driven learning more the norm. You're starting to see some schools experiment with it, but when you have a standard set of a standard set of standards and a curriculum guide and a schedule, and that all the 9-year-olds have to be, doing all of these things by certain ages, and it's like that's very antithetical to inquiry-based learning. And I think something that balances that in the learning science world is mastery-based education as well. Like we want to have a mastery-based approach in some of those harder skills, math, reading, writing, things like that. But then the whole other part of your education can be inquiry led. We don't have to just take one approach, right? So I love that you're helping facilitate more of that in the world.
That is exactly it.
It's a motivation driver. So my son found out about Outschool. He's looking at the catalog, which there's so many classes to choose from, and he really wants to take some coding classes, and he only has a Chromebook, he can't use that OS, and so he's been saving up to be able to buy a computer. So he completely on his own because of Outschool. So thank you for that. But it is such a motivation driver, though. It really drives them to want to learn and want to dive into their interests more.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there's a meta lesson in that. You can learn whatever you want. My son one day piped up and said, I want to learn German. I don't know where he got it from. Like, we don't speak German. It might have been like a family trip to Europe. And all right, well, we'll get you a German class in Outschool. And now he's taking a German class in Outschool. And the meta lesson he's learning German. He likes to count. And so he's learning numbers in German. So it's combining with math. And the meta lesson he's receiving is, oh, I can just ask dad to learn anything, and he'll provide me with something. That's a capability that was very difficult before. You have to wait to go to the library, or it'd be intensive and costly to get that. But with modern technology, you can have access to that. and you can have access to people who can help. And that's incredibly powerful, and we need to apply that power as a society. But it's really true what you said, Katie, about the uncomfortableness with this style of learning and teaching, because and it's a core problem in education. We've all been brought up within a traditional education system, or the majority of people have been brought up within a traditional education system, and we're conditioned. It's the only thing we know. And so if you try and ask people to relax that structure and be more fluid in their learning, that help kids be more fluid in their learning, it makes people like just incredibly personally uncomfortable. But if you push through, we know this from families and teachers in the alternative education ecosystem, it's possible to get there. And then you start to realize, oh wow, the power of this approach is incredible. But one thing about it that people I don't think quite realize is, from the outside, it might look kind of, I don't know, unstructured or a bit disorganized, and that makes people not appreciate the power. But it's extraordinarily intensive, and there is a lot of structure under the covers. It's just that the teacher or facilitator is paying extraordinary attention to the kid rather than the structure, listening for the hooks and the opportunities to draw links. And it's incredibly intensive. It's incredibly exciting. The experience I've had along those lines is like playing an extremely intense sport. It's also very, very tiring. And so but I don't think people see that work that is happening until you see the results. And some of these like incredible kids who've gone through this style of learning, and the results they can achieve.
Right, right. So most parents, I think, are sitting in the seat of like traditional education consumer, right? So they're used to certain results, they're used to providing certain things for their child, and it's almost like the technology of and access to these things has progressed so rapidly. It's like the technology is ahead of the demand. We're so used to sitting in the consumer seat thinking like, well, this is fine, this is what I experienced, this is like normal, even if it could be so much better. Like the parent, the mainstream average parent, I know we have like all parents who are already advocates of alternative education in the homeschooling world, but just like the bulk of parents, I think, are just very used to the normal problems associated with non-personalized learning. They don't view that as a big pain point because it's always existed. That's how they were raised. So we to raise our own awareness. It's like almost like we're living below our privileges. Like there's such a greater, like this used to be the best education that we could provide, and public education was a huge boon to society and has raised tons of people out of poverty, and it's been such a good thing. But like we've also progressed now that we can provide a personalized, individualized education for every student, and we're not yet. And it's a tragedy to me that we're not even, the parent demand isn't demanding that. The mainstream parent is not yet demanding that their child be given that personalized learning because we don't know it's possible.
It is a tragedy, and that's such a good way of putting it. That we're living below our privilege, but I think the reason why is it doesn't feel that way because people look at all the challenges in public education and think the reverse is, oh no, we need to do more here. Like things are going wrong. It's bad. We don't have the resources to do better. We have to just get to this baseline. But when you're dealing with a disruptive innovation, which is what we're talking about here, the idea that there's this new social technology that people don't even realize we can do and have the power, that allows us to leapfrog those problems and take things to a completely different level. That needs to happen. We've seen attempts to reform traditional education are not moving fast enough to keep up with the world. So, when you talk about this kind of lag between the kind of quote unquote educational technology, but I mean technology in the social sense, not the kind of computer sense, it actually looks a lot like, to me, as someone who's been in software development, a lot like traditional kind of tech-based disruption with all the same problems of crossing the chasm. This idea that you have this early audience who suddenly recognizes the power of what's coming, and then how do we take that mainstream? And what's been like super cool to observe over the lifetime of my company, and also to see others in the ecosystem, things have changed so much in the last 10 years, and not just because of COVID. There were some unlocks during COVID. People realized what their kids were actually doing in school because they could see it right there and see the problems. But also, unlocks in how we talk about alternatives. There's the homeschooling movement and homeschooling co-ops, and that has a certain reputation because of the history. But now you have microschools. And I look at a microschool and I just say, oh, I mean, this looks like a homeschool co-op with some slight tweaks. It's more kind of teacher entrepreneur led maybe than parent led. And you would know more about this than me, but my understanding is the families coming into these new models are not families who are kind of necessarily converting from homeschooling, but they're converting from traditional education, and they don't see this as like alternative in the same way as they would see homeschooling as like far out there. And this is like a step, a stage of crossing the chasm, and a really, really important one. And so you've got the growth of the homeschooling movement. Now you've got the growth of the microschooling movement. I've no doubt there'll be other steps, and that's what disruptive innovation looks like.
Yeah, I think more broadly, what we're talking about here is the unbundling of education. I think that's the term that's used, unbundling. Instead of saying, like, my kid has a basket of needs, I'm going to send them to my neighborhood public school, all of their needs will be met. Some won't, some will, and then they'll come home. Instead, saying, like, I, as a parent, am a judicious choice. I'm making judicious choices about the needs of my child and hiring different things. If you're familiar with Clayton Christensen's competing against let concept of like hiring different things to do, different jobs in your life, you might hire something to do math, and you might hire a different thing to do social emotional learning. You might hire, and to create a more flexible ecosphere of choices, where we need parents to view their role as parents and as like a steward of their child's education as a facilitator, connector of resources, right? Instead of like a drop off pickup situation. And I think you see that in the wave of homeschool, microschooling, all of this. Parents are starting to wake up to the fact that there are tools and resources out there where they can get a more tailored approach to their child that's going to make their child way happier, way more academically proficient, and to really be able to target a much more meaningful and purposeful future, because it's so much more aligned with their personal values and their mission and like what they're trying to accomplish in the world, right? When we empower parents and give them the resources and tools to do that, so it's not all on them. I think that's why you see the growth of homeschooling, but also of microschooling, because it is this interesting balance between responsibility, right? So you come into a microschool and it's different than homeschooling, where you're saying, I as the parent am taking on all of the responsibility for the education. It's like, oh, I'm sharing a part, instead of like, whereas in traditional school, maybe it's like 10% me helping with homework and then 90% the school's responsibility. And homeschool, it's totally switched, like 100%, 0%, right? You have no support. Microschooling is more like 60-40, right? My kids are going there partial days. We do a shortened week at Brenda. Obviously, you can find any type of microschool. Prenda is just one type of microschool. There are many beautiful models out there. But sharing that, and then also sharing that with the child, right? To say, like, what do you want to learn? At Prenda, we have GPS meetings, guide parent student meetings, and that is the governing body of the child's education. And Prenda is there to support, but we're not saying here's your curriculum and here's your path. It's like, here's resources and guidance and help, and let's ask some powerful questions about what this child wants to accomplish, what their interests are, and let's connect them with like the resource plan that they're going to need. Outschool would be among those resources, right? To be brought in, kind of expertise on demand, right? So it just opens up an entirely new world of like what education could be, and I just am so excited for this generation, the adoption rate that we're seeing with homeschool and microschooling, to like sink down a generation. And I'm so excited to see these kids when they're 20 and 30 and what they're doing.
I know. I think the same thing. And Katie, I love that you said steward, because I think Amir, I had heard like Outschool. I don't know if there's something I listened to that you were on, but about helping kids like create a budget and then they can go on and pick their own classes. So it's not just the parent doing everything, but it's putting the child into the driver's seat, which is owning their own learning. So yes, they're picking things that they're interested in, but they're also having this sense of agency and ownership, which I think is really powerful.
Absolutely. When we encourage parents to sit with their younger children and pick classes together. It's like my son requesting the German classes, and we encourage older kids kind of grab their put their parents out of the way and say, "Hey, you decide and you take control of your learning journey." And I agree in terms of I agree with everything that's been shared, but the point I'll pull out is, what impact is this kind of learning going to have on that new generation, and what are they going to go on to do? Because what we're creating here are learners who have gotten used to following their own path. They've had opportunity to explore their identity and interests and be exercise their autonomy from a young age. And I think that's deeply disruptive.
I can viscerally feel that. I don't even know what that's gonna be like, or like, I'm just like so excited.
It's going to be, I believe, deeply disruptive in a positive and necessary way to our society globally. And that is part of the mission, in my view, of this ecosystem that we are. There's so many problems in the world that just seem so intractable, and clearly, politicians have to deal with today and pragmatic short-term solutions. But I believe if we can create a new generation that is taught in a different way, in this way, compared with the past generations, that is the only way we're going to make a break with the problems of the past. But the challenge in education is we keep teaching our kids in the same way that we were taught and having this artificial nostalgia when we reflect on our childhood. And I think as parents and as adults, we need to reflect truthfully on our childhood and integrate. And otherwise, we'll be stuck in this world where we have this nostalgia. We pass on the same problems in the world that we received, and we'll never fix this. So I think in order to be part of this movement, you also need to do a lot of internal work on what you were talking about, Katie, that uncomfortableness when you start to break down the structure. That uncomfortableness comes from a place inside, and you need to kind of take a hard look at that if you're going to make any progress and join this movement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You said something earlier about teacher autonomy, letting the teachers that are teaching on the platform teach the class in any way that they want. And I'd love to hear, you work a lot with teachers, and I just want to kind of hear the back end of that. Like, what is it like to interact with these teachers? And do they love that autonomy? Like, we talk a lot about parent choice and student choice, but I think that no one's looking at this and saying, like, teachers need choices too, right?
Do you have certain criteria you're looking at whenever you're, ensuring that you have high quality learning experiences for these kids too? I mean, there is a fine balance there with autonomy.
Absolutely. And, oh my God, like teachers, when they hear the proposition, hey, you can teach from home, so you don't have to commute into school every day. You can teach on your schedule. You can teach the classes you always wanted to teach, and you're going to earn money for that, and at rates higher than in traditional school, though you take on some risk. They're like blown away. That can't be real. You're kidding me. but it's true. And so when teachers encounter Outschool, if they're in this mindset of seeking kind of an alternative to the traditional system, which a lot of teachers are, then they love it. And it takes a bit of getting used to, though, the idea that we're not telling them what to do. We're not providing them a curriculum. What we say is teach the classes you've always wanted to teach, because you're going to teach those with passion, and that's going to be infectious. That said, we do put limits on the marketplace. So what's different is we don't tell teachers what to teach, but then we do have standards and put some limits. And that's really important because it's expected by parents, and it's expected by society in order to build trust. And of course, we need to create a safe and trusted environment. It's online, and we all know the problems about online platforms that don't do this right and don't put some boundaries on it. But we take the approach of we're not forcing any curriculum, but we do put boundaries. And so we have safety policies such as background checks for teachers. We have a simple application form process so we can check that the teacher has some expertise in the areas that they want that they're seeking to teach, and is committed to providing a certain quality standard. In addition, after we've vetted the teachers, we have a content policy that broadly says that classes must be taught in an objective, secular, and age-appropriate manner, and we use third-party standards to evaluate against. So, example of how it plays out is we have some identity based groups based around sexuality. On the age appropriateness side, we use guidelines from the WHO. At what age would those kind of would that kind of content, those kind of groups be appropriate? On the secular side, if it's a science class that should touch on evolution, then it must touch on evolution, because the majority of experts in that area would agree that that's the right way to teach it, and that's the standard we use for objectives. That's how the kind of ways it plays out. Not everyone agrees with those standards, but the good thing about marketplace is if you don't agree with those standards for a certain subject, that doesn't matter in terms of your ability to get value from it in another subject. That's the great thing. So it enables just a huge amount of choice.
Yeah, that's another great piece of unbundling, right? Like if I'm going to send my kids to a school and there's a certain like philosophy or scope of teaching that they're teaching, and I really like parts of the school, but I don't like that. In order to select out of that, I need to take them completely out of that environment. But with a more unbundled approach, it's like, well, this isn't for my family, or like you can be more selective with those things and be, you don't have to like completely uproot your child.
100%.
So that's really important. I'm glad you shared that. And I think that's the power of a marketplace too. And parents aren't used to having that level of choice. We see this in our microschool marketplace as well. Like you can go on our website and you can put in your zip code and pull up all the guides, and you can look at their backgrounds and you can choose one. And you never get that choice at a school. Like you just get assigned a teacher, right? And if you have a problem, you have to like strongly advocate for your child to be in a different class. But and then it sets up the incentives appropriately, right? Like your teachers that are teaching on Outschool want to provide high quality because it's directly tied to their compensation, right? Like the fewer kids that come to their class, the fewer dollars they make, and so they're incentivized to do a really good job and make parents happy and keep kids happy. And I think that when we set those incentives up right, then everyone does their best work.
Absolutely, that really is the power to, and let's reward teachers for their creativity and their ability to meet learner needs, both by planning their curriculum and offering the right sort of classes that are going to work for them, and then delivering high quality. And unfortunately, the incentives in public education just don't work like that right now, and that's a big problem.
It is a big problem, but we can overcome big problems together by doing something different. It's okay.
That's it. Yeah, we have to do something different. That's a key message. Like you can't like this madness to expect different results if you do the same thing again. So, are we happy with the results as a society? Are we?
I had a teacher or a professor in college. I can't remember what the class was about, but that was like his big thing. Like if you don't like the results, like he had like little signs all over his classroom that said DSD, like do something different. Like you have to get yourself out of this rut. You have to start thinking, reading, consuming things that are counter to what like you have to expand your horizons and understand the potential of.
Isn't it sad though, Katie, that at least for us, like we didn't have that freedom to do something different until college? I look back, it's like, so you would even like, really though? I mean, I think about like my elementary, I didn't know I had the option to do something different in a lot of my classes. I mean, I really loved school, I really did. And I do well with conformity. But I just think about that, like it wasn't until college, it's like, wait, someone's not just telling me what class I need to be in. I get to create my own schedule. Sweet. I'm not going to have any classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Just like, it's just amazing that we had to wait that long to be able to have this choice and freedom.
But that's the thing. There's this irony. I really enjoyed traditional schooling. I got about the best traditional education in the UK as possible to get, and yet becoming an adult, realizing, oh, wow, even the best of traditional education, someone who was lucky enough to be very suited to that mode. In my working life and life as an entrepreneur, there's so many things I realized, oh, wow, there's a big discrepancy here. And then I think, because I was lucky enough to be a beneficiary of the current traditional system, I'm now in a place to do something to change it. Because I'm also aware that so many, for all kinds of reasons, just did not have a good experience in school, or were not successful, and think they're bad at math just because they weren't taught math in the right way, or they didn't have and it could be a matter of just gelling with the right teacher, or gelling with the right style of teaching.
Or not having to take tests that you get a D and then you're like, oh, I'm horrible at math, even though you might actually be decent at math, but that grade then determines what you think about yourself.
And then it affects your sense of identity, and it was all because, I don't know, you had one bad day, and got into a vicious feedback cycle, and that can be corrected. And yeah, it drives me nuts when people say, they're bad at something. Maybe today, or under the current circumstances, but what could the circumstances have been different? Could there have been a world? Could there have been a school or a teacher who might have set you on a completely different trajectory? And yeah, of course, like everyone has like innate talents, and we're all different as humans and have different strengths, but we do not go anywhere close to exploring that before we kind of solidify on this identity based on grades and having had like a one attempt in one structure at finding success. And it's madness.
Yeah, and what you said is about like you went to a really good school. We had Josh Don on he started school with Elon Musk at Astra, and he was talking about how we just really wanted to create a good school, but then the way he was describing it was not what people would typically describe as a good school. It's like collaborative, and these kids are develop really strong critical thinking skills, and so I just think that is amazing that we are slowly shifting, and I'm so excited to be part of this movement. And what you guys are doing at Outschool is allowing kids they could still be in a traditional environment and doing Outschool, which I think is amazing too. It's not like one or this or that. It can be which is really amazing.
And important for the element of this movement, which is like crossing the chasm. It's a lot. These ideas are a lot. I've been steeped in them for years, but to ask someone to like pick up these ideas, which are so counter to how we're kind of designed as a society, it's too much. And that's why we're intent at Outschool on creating this on ramp that you can just like start with one class, and after school, we're not asking you to like adopt all these ideas all at once, or just. But what we would say is, hey, try it out, and you'll see.
Yeah. I remember my very first conversation with Kelly Smith, our founder, where we kind of like drew a line of like the like adopter scale. And we like at one end, you have like people who will go through any inconvenience and any expense to provide exactly what their child needs. Like they will homeschool, they will like anything. And then there are kind of people on the other end of the spectrum who are like very comfortable with the norm and they're pretty much never gonna like do anything different. And then there's a ton of people in the middle who are uncomfortable and would do something different if it was a little bit easier. And I think like like they're not going to go all the way to homeschool, but like there's just this middle group. And now that conversation was 5 years ago, which is not a long time, but already you see this movement and all of these other options to really facilitate that middle of like we can do much better without you having to sacrifice your career or like all of the things that you might give up to provide that for your child. Like it's more accessible and more doable for a greater number of adults on the planet now than it ever has been in the history of humanity, right?
100%. And there's a really interesting interaction post pandemic with the future of work, because I don't know, no families are like, well, I kind of work remotely. I've got more flexibility than ever before, but I can't do this thing I really want to do, like move country for a year because my kids are in school. It used to be work that tied you to a location and a schedule, and that's been released. Not obviously not for many many people, but there's a much larger group who've been released from that constraint and start to realize, oh, but like school is a thing holding us back from living the life they want to lead, and just that practical element of it makes people more amenable to this idea that like school is behind where society is going and needs to catch up. If we were going to grade the school system, it's not up there. I won't actually give it a grade, but it's not up there, and it needs to improve its performance.
Do you see a lot of your students or families that use Outschool, like that are road schoolers, world schoolers? Are you seeing them utilize Outschool in that way?
Yeah, 100%. It's a subset of the community. Obviously, people are using it in many different ways, it being a broad marketplace. But absolutely, world schoolers are a key audience for us, because obviously the idea of being able to have continuity in your child's education while you move country to country, but you keep your peer groups, you keep your teachers. That's revolutionary for world schoolers. It means they don't have to do everything themselves, which is or change every time they move. So that's an exciting movement, because it's a kind of a niche within a niche, but a really interesting one, and kind of almost indicates probably where we're going to go with the future of work in conjunction with the future of education.
Yeah, I see those same trends for sure. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the student experience on Outschool. Specifically, how do you see these kids learning like creative problem solving and critical thinking skills? Like, talk to me about how that's facilitated.
Well, I think it comes across in many different ways in different classes. Some classes are specifically targeted at those skills. Like there's a learn critical thinking skills through Dungeons and Dragons class. So if you search for critical thinking directly, you'll get classes that attempt to kind of that are explicitly intended to do that. Though of course, in learning any subject, the teachers that we have who are often very experienced and credentialed teachers. But the only way you can be effective in this in group classes and online format is if you've got a lot of skill and experience. They're building it in to whatever they're teaching. But yeah, you can do a search and find which teachers are explicitly targeting that and how they're talking about their classes. And then, in terms of measuring progress, or how do we see how a learner is developing, we ask teachers to define outcomes of their classes. And we recently launched a feature, an AI teaching assistant, which allows a teacher to provide very quickly a few notes of feedback post class and construct kind of a mini report that can go back to the parent. And that's really important because it kind of helps close the feedback loops. There's awareness of the parent of what's happening in class, and tips to the parent how they can reinforce the learning. And that's really exciting because it's a very important feedback loop, but it's time consuming for a teacher to be doing that. And this is actually an area where I'm really excited about, where AI can contribute. I think it's often overhyped, as any technology trend is, but this specific piece, like reducing workload for teachers to allow them to implement best practices that they already know.
Yes, that's beautiful. At Prenda, we do half mastery, half inquiry, but then within each category, we have instructional, like an instruction and an assessment loop. And it's really hard to take assessment into inquiry. And so I think you could have easily ended that sentence with, and then the teacher gives them all a letter grade, right? But you didn't say that. You said they give them like feedback. So there's feedback and there's real product, right? Like you're going to produce something in this class and you're going to show that. And you're going to have an authentic audience and you're going to experience like, well, I wish I had done a better job. That those kind of natural motivators. But we always I don't think that there's a clear enough vision about how to close that feedback loop in a non-judgmental way, right? We don't have to look at all of our feedback and then put that into a letter grade and then like label the child with a certain grade. We can just give them that direct feedback because that's actionable. That actually helps them improve. A letter grade just tells them how good am I compared to other people, and it teaches them to look for external validation for their own value, which is kind of the heart of like the I will call it a disease of humanity right now, right? Like we don't have we haven't been brought up to believe in ourselves enough to know that like yes, I value the feedback of the world, but like it doesn't define me as a person of value or worth. And like I'm more than my grades essentially, which a lot of kids don't feel, you know?
Wow. I've heard those ideas before, but in the way that you express them, I think is really powerful. And it makes me think, I think as a society, we are bad at giving and receiving feedback. We are good at judging and like giving each other grades for things.
And really good at feeling shame. We're really good at that too.
Yeah, really good at feeling. And oh my God, that's how we were brought
I
up.
read a book once called Feedback is a Gift, and just goes through how terrifying it is to receive feedback, right? It's almost like we're more comfortable with judgment than actual feedback because we're used to it. So then that transfers into our relationships because as like partners and parents, like we aren't giving each other grades saying like you really need to shape up when as like I'm giving you a D minus in housekeeping. Like we don't do that. We talk and we have to have conversations, and those conversations are gritty and they're full of emotions, and that's the kind of feedback that we don't know how to give, we don't know how to receive it, and that's kind of the tension point in a lot of our relationships. And so I just am excited for a society where we become more interested in feedback and having a growth mindset and being open to like making personal changes based on feedback. And I think that this is Outschool and Prenda and all this whole movement is like a big force for good in that direction.
100%. I'm looking at kindergarten options for my son, including exploring microschool options at some progressive schools where I'm based. And we went to one progressive school tour, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, we don't give grades. We give feedback." And there was an immediate partition of the audience. Like some parents going, "Yeah," like me, "Yeah, that sounds great." Like, yeah, there's place for grades. I think that can happen later. And some parents like taken aback, going, "Oh my God, like, is my 5-year-old going to be left behind because they don't get grades?" It's absolutely tragic. We're talking about 5-year-olds here.
Well, even that thought of left behind, like what does left behind even mean? Because that is such a cultural thing because we've had these standards and this child needs to learn about butterflies in kindergarten and learn about, osmosis at this age. So it's like the left behind thought. paradigm, I think is where we get in trouble too.
Yeah, but we need to develop as people involved in this space who now have the perspective that we do. I think it's our duty to shatter these illusions and develop a variety of techniques like soft and hard in order to do that. I consider an obligation and a duty, knowing what I now know and having seen what I've seen from this community and from our users.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh my gosh, we could keep going because I am enjoying this conversation so much, but I want to be mindful of your time. And so this is a question we actually ask all of our guests that come onto the KindlED podcast. Who is someone who has kindled your love of learning, curiosity, motivation, or passion?
There's so many people I could choose from. My parents sprang to mind immediately, and then obviously a lot of amazing teachers, both formal and informal, along the way. The person I'll call out, though, is someone I've never met, but who's been deeply inspiring to me because of what he did and a movement that he created. It's the founder of Burning Man. A guy called Larry. I actually forget his last name right now, so I'm on first name terms with this guy I never met.
I love it.
Burning Man has its own reputation, and it's kind of a little bit cheesy for a tech person to be talking about Burning Man. But go look at the values on their website, and I challenge you not to immediately see the link between that and alternative education and even an entrepreneurial journey. The values of radical self-expression, radical self-reliance, communal effort, leave no trace. I find them incredibly inspiring. I saw a lot of them in the homeschooling movement when I was first becoming familiar with it. I said, oh, wow. The creativity of that movement and the kind of iconic nature that's starting to make its way through our society, I think is really interesting. So yeah, I'll call that out as maybe a more unusual one.
I'm going to say that wins for most interesting answer we've had.
I love it. Now I need to go Google and look at the values. So thank you. I'm always so curious.
Awesome. Well, how can our listeners learn more about your work?
Go to outschool.com and look at our classes and hear the stories of our learners and parents, and join in. It's easy to get started. You can start with a one-time class, low commitment, low cost. I encourage you to try the class and meet some of our teachers and see for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Amir. We've really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for coming on the KindlED podcast.
Thanks so much. It's been fun.
Thank you, Amir. If this episode was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and follow us on social at Prenda Learn. If you have a question you'd like us to address, all you have to do is leave a comment or email us at podcast@prenda.com. You can also join our Facebook group called the KindlED Collective and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Sunday Spark.
The KindlED Podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all of the ideas and principles that we talk about here on the KindlED Podcast. If you want more information about guiding a Prenda microschool, just go to prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.